Hey everyone, I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold here with another of our weekly lectures. This lecture is on Susan Polgar, also known as Zsuzsa Polgar, before she was Susan Polgar. When I first met her, she was Zsuzsa, but it's a Hungarian name. She's lived in the US for 30 years? Let's see, what year is this? 1993 is 30 years ago. No, I don't think she moved here at that point. Oh wait, yes she did maybe. No. Anyway, we'll say 25 years. We'll split the difference. That Susan's lived in the US. She's lived in New York, and she had a chess center there, where Gotham Chess and Fabiano Caruana first played chess at her chess center in Queens. Then she moved to Texas Tech in Lubbock, because who doesn't want to live in Lubbock? And she was the coach, along with her husband, of the Texas Tech team. And then she moved to St. Louis, again with her husband. They worked at the Webster University, and currently she's retired. And based on Twitter, she's traveling the world a lot and taking lots of nice pictures of nice stuff. So that sounds like fun, except for the traveling part, but being there is good. Anyway, I want to thank our sponsor, Lauren Benedict. Thank you for sponsoring this lecture. If you'd like to sponsor a lecture, contact my wife, Karen. Her email is karen@atlchessclub.com. And you too can sponsor a lecture. Okay, so first we'll look at her Wikipedia, and I'll probably tell some witty stories of, hanging out with Susan and meeting her and getting invited to tournaments. She was born in '69, and I was born in '69, so typically we're the same age, except between April 19th and September 5th, when she's a year older than me. So based on the year the games were played, she was the same age that I was. And I have a couple of games played when she was 14 or 15 years old. Now, as many of you know, but most people are confused. Most people don't realize that there's three Polgar sisters, and that the strongest one is Judith, mainly because Judith isn't on social media all the time talking about her career, whereas Susan Polgar and her husband Paul Truong, they have a big presence on social media. So some people believe, without knowing the facts, that Susan was the strongest Polgar. And Susan was the strongest Polgar until Judith was better. Then there's the third sister, Sofia Polgar. Judith lives in Hungary with her husband. He's a veterinarian. And the reason I know that is Judith Polgar would take her animal to the vet, and she decided that vet looks pretty good. So she would keep coming back to the vet, making stuff up. Like, have a look at my animal. I don't know if it was a dog or a cat, but got to see the vet again. And the vet was like, man, this woman's bringing her animals in a lot, and then realized that's because she liked him. And they ended up getting married. And I met him in China. He's very tall. I would say 6'3", 6'4". Nice guy, friendly guy. And her sister Sophia, who lives in I think she lives in Israel, but there was a point in time where her and her husband moved to Toronto. Then they moved back to Israel. So my current knowledge is they live in Israel, but my current knowledge isn't very current, although I could be right. Now, her husband, unlike most husbands, and when I say most husbands, there's like two in the world. He's a grandmaster at chess, and he's a medical doctor. And I know two other people who are grandmasters and medical doctors, although one of them passed away last year, Alex Scherzer. Although that might have been this year. No, I think it was last year, although I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it, but. And so her husband's name is Georgi Kashishvili. His name's Koshishvili. And there's actually a grandmaster, Kashishvili, who I mentioned. I even said his first name. So hopefully our editor will edit that out. No, I'm kidding. Georgi Kashishvili is another grandmaster. She's not married to him. She's married to Yona Koshishvili, the Israeli grandmaster, who I think hasn't played chess in 1,000 years. And one of the reasons Susan moved to the US, she now lives in suburban St. Louis, is because her first husband was American, and they lived in New York. Then after they got divorced, she married her manager, Paul Truong, who's also like a 2300 player. And they moved to Texas and now live in St. Louis. And I actually met Paul way before I met Susan, because Paul played in the 1984 U.S. Junior Championship, which was my first junior championship in Ojai, California. And Paul was very good at ping pong. He had brought his own ping pong paddle and beat everybody. And they're known to have ping pong tables no matter where they live. They had one in Texas in their house, and they have one in St. Louis. And also the Polgar sisters were very good at ping pong. So I don't know if Susan and Paul have played ping pong together ever, but probably. They're in the same house, so if you're both good at ping pong, you might as well play. Karen and I play occasionally, but not as often as we used to. Okay, now what Susan's really, really good at, okay, most people I'm like, they're good at chess, okay? She's good at chess, she's a grandmaster, she's in the US Chess Hall of Fame, and just recently, in the last 3 weeks, she was put into the World Chess Hall of Fame. Okay, that's very rare to be in both, and especially for a female player, it's unheard of. And Susan's really, really good at getting players from Europe to come to her universities and play chess. And I know that she's really good because I actually did that for a few months, and I was not good. There's good, there's not good. I'm not good. And Susan was getting grandmaster after grandmaster to come to Texas Tech, followed by getting grandmaster to come to Webster, and not ordinary grandmasters, very strong grandmasters. Ray Robson, Laquan Lim, these are grandmasters that are top 100 in the world, and in some cases top 50. And many, 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 many other grandmasters. And it started a trend of a lot of grandmasters going to universities in the US, especially in Texas, and playing chess. And so we have a lot of foreign players in the US, which helps our players get GM norms. So she's been tremendously successful at being a coach at these universities and getting the, I don't want to say kids, but getting the players to play well. And I mean, some of them are just fantastic chess players to start with, and they got better also. And so she's the best collegiate coach of all time in any place ever, because she would take programs that had like nobody, and all of a sudden 10 grandmasters go to the school like that. I mean, so she's a genius at getting grandmasters to come to the university she coaches. So if she ever comes out of retirement and you're a university president or provost and you want a good chess team, she's the only person you need to hire, and in a year or two you'll be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. Susan was the best Polgar for a long time until Judith overtook her as the highest rated Polgar. There's a picture of the wedding photo of her second husband, Paul Truong, and there's a picture when they were kids with their dad, Laszlo. I actually played in a tournament in Brussels when I lived there where I played Judith and I won, but we're not talking about me now. And Laszlo Polgar was playing in the tournament, the father. And I think he was like 1800. So they all play chess. I don't know if the mom plays chess. The mom was there, but she wasn't playing in the tournament. And the Polgars grew up in a chess family, much like myself, except they're better than my family. My dad was a chess master. My brother's a chess master. I'm a grandmaster. My son is a chess master. So we have chess in our family too. And I have a lot of Polgar stories, but my favorite one is I was in Budapest with my friend. I was coaching him. He was playing in an IM Norm round robin tournament, and this was around, I'll say 1990. I'm within a year. It was either 89, 90, or 91. I'm close. And I said, hey, I have the Polgar's address. Let's go visit them. So we found where they lived, and it was like in an apartment building, and they had, I think, 2 connecting apartments because there's a lot of them. And I knocked on the door, and Judith opened the door, and she was like, Ben, and she didn't know the other guy. And then they invited me in, and they gave us refreshments, and we all hung out for a while. They told me where the good vegetarian restaurants were. I was a vegetarian then. And at some point, 2 or 3 of the Polgars were vegetarians, and now I don't know, because I haven't spoken to them in such a long time. But we used to all be vegetarians, so they knew where to go to get good vegetarian food in Budapest. Anyway, very nice family. I like the dad, I like the mom, I like all the Polgars. They're all great. Judith was top 10 in the world, and probably for women, Susan was top 5 in the world for about 25 years, I would say. So that's pretty good. And she was women's world champion many times. And in the Olympiads, she won 11 medals. And I don't know anybody who's won 11 medals in the Olympiads. She might be the only one. It's hard to play in 11 Olympiads, but then to play in 11 and win a medal in all of them is crazy. So she's crazy good at chess, as is her family. And there's some controversy around Susan. They tried to make chess better, and they didn't get along with the Hungarian Chess Federation. They didn't get along with the US Chess Federation. But even though there was some infighting and arguing, and her and Paul were on the board at some point before they left, still she's in the US Chess Hall of Fame and the World Chess Hall of Fame. So I guess everybody's forgiven everybody and everybody's happy now. And you can read a lot about Susan on the Wikipedia page. The longer your Wikipedia page is, the stronger you are at chess. And she's written lots of chess books also, and she has DVDs for sale. She made videos online. And she's very popular online. She has a big presence on Facebook and Twitter. And I know you guys don't call it Twitter anymore, but too bad, that's your problem. Anyway, you can read more about Susan. I've talked enough about who she is. Now we have to look at her games. One thing I want to mention, because I forgot, not only was she born the same year that I was, the date that she was born is also my mom's birthday. So I could always remember when her birthday was, or I could remember like what year I was born. I could figure that out. Okay. So it turns out I looked at about 24 games where Susan played great, and it's a famous game and everything was good. And coincidentally, I don't know why, all of the games that I picked, she had white. She won a lot of great games with black, but I just didn't pick those games. I don't know. Okay, so the first one is against Peter Hardicsay. He's a Hungarian player, just like Susan is. This was played in '85, so depending on the month it was played, she was either 15 or 16 years old. So keep that in mind. And later in the lecture, I'm going to show a game from 1984, so she was even younger. But okay, I'm saving that for last because I like that game. Okay, so this is a Benoni, and this is actually the game, and I didn't know this. I'm innocent. This is the one game that they list on her Wikipedia page as being like her best game, and that was the first game I wanted to show you. Then I opened her Wikipedia to show the class, and I'm like, hey, that's the game in my lecture. So I did a good job finding her best games. Okay, so she played a very sharp variation, and I think the Polgars are all known, well, maybe not the dad, but they're all known for great opening preparation. Okay, so she played very sharp line in the modern Benoni, bishop f4 early. And then in this position, she plays queen a4 check. Okay, so the idea is if black has to play king f8, I've done my job. If black plays the move b5, that's just hanging because the a pawn is pinned. Now you're in check, and if you take the bishop, then I can play queen takes rook. So you have to play either knight b to d7, knight f to d7, or bishop d7. Or if you're having a bad day, sometimes we're having a bad day, you can play queen d7. Okay, but I wouldn't play queen d7 for several reasons. One is bishop b5, the aforementioned bishop b5. One is bishop takes d6. And one is just queen takes queen, and the d6 pawn is hanging. So we're not going to play queen d7. He played bishop d7, which is the main move. And Susan played queen b3. Now she's threatening the pawn on b7. Okay, and black played something that's sort of theoretical, bishop g4, sacrificing the b7 pawn. And that's why white played queen b3, to take the b7 pawn. And there's some variations which are even crazier than the game, which start out with queen c7, bishop takes d6, queen d6, queen b7, and we're going to win the rook in the corner. And then we hope our queen doesn't get trapped. Sometimes your queen gets trapped. That's life. Okay, there's crazy lines like that, but they played another crazy line. Queen takes b7, bishop takes f3, ruining white's pawn structure, or so he thought, and Susan ignored the bishop and just took the rook. Now the bishop on f3 is hanging, and white is up the exchange in a pawn. But you could argue white's queen could get trapped, the e4 pawn is hanging, white's king is still in the center, maybe black will get an attack. Okay, black played knight takes e4. Now I don't know how much of this is theory, and more importantly, I don't know how much of this was theory in 1985. In 1985, I don't know if they studied bishop f4 a lot. It's a very sharp way to play, but there's not a lot of games in this variation now. I think, for the most part, super grandmasters have given up the modern Benoni, and it's only played by IMs and FMs at the top level. Okay, so rook c1. This seems like an unusual move to me, so I'm guessing this is still her preparation. It defends the knight on c3. We can trade, but then the bishops are good for black. Bishop takes b2 is a threat. Queen a5 check could be coming soon. I could castle quickly. So maybe rook c1 is just like a known move. That defends the knight on c3. Okay, bishop d4, threatening the pawn on f2. And Susan has a very unusual way to defend her f-pawn. I haven't seen this in an opening, and it could be her prep, but I doubt it. She played the move rook c2. Now that's a good way to defend your f-pawn. So black is down material, and white's threatening to take all these pieces here. And so black played knight takes f2, confusing the audience. Rook takes f2. If you told me 3 moves ago the rook on a1 would be on f2, I would not believe you. I still don't believe you, and I'm looking at it. Why are you telling me that stuff? Okay, bishop f2, king f2. Now white is up a piece. White's 1 piece more than black. Bishop g4, and black is hoping, with the king exposed and the queen trapped in the corner, that black will have compensation for a piece. Bishop b5 check, giving back her piece. This is a brilliant move. Okay, so black's like, thanks, I got my piece back. Rook e1 check, now black can't castle. King d7 looks suicidal, so king f8. Bishop h6 check, so pretty easy to calculate. King g8. And Susan must have calculated past this position, because in this position, white's down a pawn instead of being up a piece. And she must have seen the brilliant move that she played next to move. Although the moves later are even more brilliant. So this is amazing. Okay, Susan Polgar in this position plays the brilliant move, rook e7. That's what I would have played, except for one thing. Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that. And the idea is if you take the rook, then you'll get mated on the back rank eventually. Man, if I didn't say eventually, there'd be a lot of comments on YouTube. That's not mate. Black can give all his pieces away. Okay, now rook e7 has a threat, and I don't think black saw the threat, but if black did see the threat, it doesn't matter, because white's winning anyway. So in this position, black played bishop d7. I think the idea is, if we take the bishop, then probably black plays queen h4 check. And then I'm too confused to play. I assume white is still winning, but I'm not sure. Because there's probably some perpetuals. White can walk into mate in 1, which is funny. Unless you have the white pieces, then it's less funny. And probably black can take this bishop next move, and his king will have g7, and the white king is going to be super exposed. Okay, although, I mean, if I was a betting man, I would think rook takes bishop wins. And if you thought rook e7 was a brilliant move, maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, rook e7, I don't care about that. You're going to like this next move. Okay, and I think this is why this game is on her Wikipedia page. There's more than one brilliant move. And she plays queen sacrifice, queen takes b8, and so black has to take it. And then knight e4, threatening knight f6 mate. And if you can stop knight f6 mate, you're a better chess player than I am. Okay, also you cheat a lot. No cheating. So that's pretty funny. Susan ended up down a queen, but she's threatening knight f6 mate, and the only way to prevent it is to resign. There's not even a check. So if you're playing online, you can pre-move knight f6 mate. Now, again, I want to remind you that she was probably 15 when this game was played. So that's very impressive. Susan was playing for like the Hungarian Olympiad team when she was just a kid. And she was usually board 1. And you can see why. A brilliant attacking player that is more associated with the way Judith plays. Okay, but this is Susan Polgar. Okay, let's go to the next game, since that game's over. Okay, next game is against former world champion Maia Chiburdanidze, and this is at the Olympiad in 2004. And obviously these players are board 1. And Susan and Maia were both world champions, women's world champions, when they were active. Okay, so Susan has white. This game has a more boring opening until it doesn't. Okay, just a boring English. White has the slight advantage of having the 2 bishops. Okay, but nobody's doing much at the beginning. Then G4, recommended by Matt Larson. Now, was Matt Larson alive in 2004? Yes, he was 3 years old, I think. So the idea is, I want to play G5. If you don't believe me, see the rest of the game. And if black takes the pawn, then white plays checkmate. Okay, nobody's going to fall for that. So black played bishop b7. Susan played g5. Now, if the knight moves to a random square, queen takes g7 could be mate. So black has 2 options, knight h5 or knight e8, defending g7. She played the more active option. Rook g1, getting out of this pin, supporting the g-pawn. e5, blocking the queen and bishop battery. Bishop h3, put it in h. Now that the pawn's not on e6, this is a nice open diagonal for the bishop. Knight f4. Now the knight doesn't have to defend g7 anymore, so we can move our knight away. Bishop f5, g6, and now knight takes e5. Now every move Susan plays is a sacrifice, and then when she has no pieces left, she calls the arbiter and says, "Are we playing bug house?" And he's like, "Yeah." Then it takes some more pieces and put them on the board. Okay, so Susan sacrifices a knight. She wants to get this checkmate going before black is developed. So now Maia can take either piece, e5 or f5. She plays knight takes e2 instead, which is a funny move. And that opens the e file. So for example, if I take this and you take with the queen, then I don't know what black should do. Probably resign, because white's threatening mates, the knight on f4 is hanging. So what Maia wanted to do was attack the queen, and she was probably thinking, if you take the knight, which seems really obvious, then I'll take the knight, and now you can't play queen takes e5, because rook e8 pins the queen to the king, and there's no mate because it's illegal. So probably that's what Maia was thinking. I'm going to take, she'll play king takes e2, and then take the knight. Okay, and then a very surprising move from Susan Polgar. I know I was surprised when I looked at the game. Knight takes f7. Okay, threatening knight h6 checkmate with advantage. Also, you can't take the knight because my queen's going to come in and mate you somewhere. Okay, so you can't take the knight, but you can't allow knight h6 check. So there's only one move. Knight takes c3. Now, black is up a queen. Knight check. The king has to move. g7 is better than h8, because after bishop takes, you have to play rook f6. So it's better that your king is on g7, so you're defending f6. And you're attacking the knight on h6, which ends up being important. So now bishop takes, rook check, queen takes, pawn takes. If black plays king takes pawn, black is down a rook. However, even better than a pawn is king takes knight. And in this position, Susan made her only mistake. Okay, but she was always winning, so you could argue that it wasn't a mistake because she was winning before the move and she's winning after the move. So that's not a mistake. But she could have played better here. Now she should play for checkmate by playing either rook c1 or rook b1 with the idea of rook c3, rook h3 mate. That is a very difficult mate to stop. If you take the bishop, that doesn't help you stop it. You can see the black pieces aren't doing a good job. If you don't take the bishop, I'm still going to play rook c3, rook h3 mate. The black king has nowhere to go. Okay, and you can't play knight d7 to take the f pawn, which would alleviate the mate, because I take your knight on d7. Then I'm up a rook. So rook c1 or rook b1 would have won more quickly, but she tortured her opponent. She played bishop e6, the only mistake in the game. And she's always winning, so hard to call it a mistake. She just upped the exchange for nothing. So a very easy technical win. And the rest of the game isn't interesting, it's just her taking everything. Although the final move of the game I like. The final move of the game is after knight d2, she takes the knight, which isn't necessary, but it wins the quickest. Then rook takes, rook c6. We can't allow rook takes c4 because we'll be down 2 connected passed pawns. So she defended it, b6, and white's going to play a5, a6, a7, and get 2 queens. So black resigned. So it was sort of a nice finish, but she could have finished it off a little quicker. But maybe for her teammates, she wanted to make her opponent suffer for later rounds. Good to make your opponent suffer a little bit. So a brilliant win against her main competitor for many years in women's chess, Maia Chiburdanidze. Okay, great game. That was in the women's Olympiad. Okay, next game, she's playing Jean-Luc Costa, who I've never heard of. And you might say, why haven't you heard of him? Well, if you look at the game, you'll see why I haven't heard of him. The truth hurts. Okay, and he has black. Susan's white every game. This game was played in 87. Judith was in her top form between like 1985 and 2005. That was the sweet spot for Susan. Probably in the 1990s was her absolute peak. Okay, so Susan's white, and they play a symmetrical collie. Okay, and then she plays b3. So this position, I used to play the collie too, and I played b3 also. So I like this game because this is how I played with white on many occasions. Queen a5 check doesn't make any sense. I don't like queen a5 check. Okay, but that's why we're not lecturing on Mr. Costa. Okay, castles, knight bd2, rook d8. So white has a nice smooth development. Black's bishop on c8 is frankly terrible. Rook e1. Then he moves his queen back to c7 since the queen does nothing on a5. c4, opening the center. And here, after b6, rook c1, putting the rook opposite the queen, black decided to take on c4. And typically, you would take with a pawn here and have those nice pawns in the center. But since this file is open to the queen, she correctly took with the knight because she wants to play knight on c to e5 and put tremendous pressure on the c file. Okay, so queen b7 getting off of the c file. Knight e5 anyway. Knight b4 trying to get control of the d5 square. Also attacking the bishop and maybe even attacking this pawn. So bishop b1 saving everything. Bishop d7. Finally black develops his bishop. And now Susan starts the crushing attack. Knight g5, obviously threatening f7. So bishop e8. Then rook c3. Here comes a rook lift. g6. She puts her rook on g3. So she's looking to sacrifice all over here. And John Fontaine agrees with all of that. He's like, man, I want to have white here and sack everything. Okay, you'll get your chance. Okay, bishop f8. Always play bishop f8. Bishop a3. She wants to get rid of this knight and get rid of the bishop from the king's side so she can continue checkmating. So now the bishop wants to defend the king's side, but it has to keep an eye on this knight. Queen a6, attacking the bishop on a3. Queen f3, threatening the knight on f6. The bishop can't go to g7 and defend the knight because the knight on b4 wouldn't be protected. So they traded. Bishop takes, queen takes. Now obviously white's threatening either knight taking on f7 with total demolishing crushingness. So bishop g7, queen goes back to f3. Once again, black is threatening f7 with 3 pieces. And so black decided to never do something. Wait a minute. He did do it. I can't believe he did it. He played f6. Never play f6. He said, yay, I'm forking the knights and I'm stopping knight takes f7. Now, if I was white here and I was playing a blitz game, I would play knight takes e6. In fact, if I was playing a slow game, I might play knight takes e6. Okay, but Susan played better. She played much more interesting and much better for our class. Okay, why take a pawn when you can sacrifice your knight? Now both knights are hanging. Black can take this knight or this knight, but now you can see the bishop and the rook are quite well placed. So it doesn't matter what black does. The engine's like, yay, I want to have white. The engine loves white. It says, take either knight, I'm going to checkmate you. So he took the knight that was up in his grill. King takes. Queen h5 check. Notice the g-pawn is pinned. If I try to take, it won't let me. It's hard to see because the bishop is so far away. Okay, and I wasn't sure about it, so I asked Dire Straits. And I said, what do you think of that bishop? And they said, it's so far away from me. And I was like, all right. Man, nobody's going to get that joke. Maybe one or two people. Okay, depends how many thousands of you watch this video. All right, so king back to g8, back to safety. Bishop takes g6, threatening everything. White technically is threatening everything. That's the technical term. Takes the knight on e5, takes the bishop on e8. Now, white's threatening queen f7 check and rook h3 will be mate. You notice the queen and the knight aren't doing an excellent job of defending black's king. Okay, and not excellent as me being nice. Frankly, terrible. Okay, so black played the obvious move. And now this is very funny. White's down 2 pieces, right? Just 2 pieces down. And white makes a very simple threat, very obvious threat, and black has no defense. And the reason black has no defense is because of these pieces. The queen's out of play, and the knight stops the queen from getting back into play. That's when you checkmate somebody when all their pieces are on the queen side. Queen g5, very simple. You could also play queen g6 or queen g4, but that's no good because the way to defend the bishop is rook e7. If the white queen was on g6 or g4, that would be fine for black. But now it's no good. If you play rook e7, I take it. And now I'm threatening queen takes g7 mate, and there's no defense. I think I can pre-move queen g7 mate. Well, if you don't play rook e7, what do? The answer is fries. Black resigned after queen g5. So Susan sacrifices all of her pieces. Her opponent puts pieces on the queen's side, and the attack is successful. A brilliant game from Susan. And Susan wasn't known as a big attacking player. She was known as an all-around player. She would beat you in the end game. She'd beat you strategically. She'd beat you with an opening trap. She would have a big attack. She'd win every possible way. But obviously, if I'm having a lecture about her, I want to show the most beautiful games. Now, my favorite game is the last one. And this was played possibly when she was 14 against Vladimir Dimitrov. This is in 1984. So if this was before her birthday, she was 14. If it was after, she was 15. We'll never know. Inquiring minds want to know. Okay, so the game went d4, d5, Susan's white. Okay, they play semi-Slav. Okay, and you guys are going to like this game the most because something happens in this game that you never see. And maybe you've seen it, but it's extremely rare. And bishop e2 is a move that I've actually played. And if you want to see a game that I lost, in the 2000, I'm going to say 8, but it could be 7. In the 2008 U.S. Championship in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I think it was 2008, I played Varakobian, and I only lost 1 or 2 games in the tournament, but Akobian was a game I remember losing. I actually don't remember losing any other games, but I'm sure I did. But I lost to Akobian with white, and I played bishop e2, which I had been playing. And the idea is, after bishop b7, you play the move e4, and after b4, you play e5. And what happens is, if black plays for the difference between bishop e2 and bishop d3, it's actually important because I did it. Yeah, it's queen takes d4. Right. So the difference is If it goes a6, e4, c5, e5, c takes d4, if the white bishop is on d3, this is very theoretical. Lots of grandmaster games. If the bishop's on e2, this is just bad for black. And I've actually had this, because now you can play queen takes d4. Queen takes d4 isn't legal with your bishop on d3. And actually, I had this once. I believe it was in a U.S. championship. I'm thinking it was against Blas Lugo, but this is like 20 years ago, so my memory is suspicious. And this is already very bad for black. This position's like plus 1.5 for white or something. Okay, so black doesn't play that way against bishop e2. Black plays bishop b7 and b4. And in this position, white plays the move e5. This is my game with var Jacobian. And after takes, Jacobian correctly played knight takes f6. And based on my game with Jacobian, that's slightly better for black. Although I think the engine says it's equal. But I got outplayed and beat like relatively easily. However, people who don't know this line and know the theory, they really like the move c takes b2. The engine doesn't like it, but people who don't know theory like it. Okay, and that must have been the case here. Now this was 1984, so I'm not sure how much theory there was on this position then. And the reason you guys are going to like this game a lot is white took on g7 and everybody promoted to a queen. Takes queen, and now there's 4 queens on the board. And as is the well-known saying, 4 queens, what else? Okay, you don't see 4 queens on the board right out of the opening, but this is one opening you could. This position's occurred before, and the engine likes white. And the reason the engine likes white is black can't castle kingside. You can guess why. White can castle kingside. His king's very safe. And if black castles queenside, that doesn't really help his king so much either. So basically, due to king safety, the engine's like white here. But it's pretty cool to have 4 queens on in the opening. Okay, queen b1, that move I've never seen, that defends the h-pawn. I think queen a5 check is more common than white castles. I would say black's already lost here just because of black's king position. Queen f6, always trade queens. And after they trade queens, they still have queens on the board. Okay, knight e5. White wants to go for bishop h5, attacking the f-pawn. Queen takes a2. Black takes a free pawn. Bishop c4, attacking the queen. Queen moves away. Queen f3, threatening the knight on f6. The knight can't move away because queen takes f7, check wins. So bishop e7 is forced. Bishop g5. The knight can't move, but the knight's attacked. So black only has one move here. And it's funny because he plays queen d8. And if you were paying attention, I'm not saying you were paying attention, that is not his original queen. That's the queen he promoted to. His original queen is gone. This is white's original queen. So if you were walking by and you saw this position, you would bet a lot of money that this queen isn't a promoted queen. That's just where they started. So the pawn promoted on a1, made a few moves, worked its way back to d8. And he had to play queen d8 to defend his knight on f6. So black won a pawn, but at what price? The answer is fries. Bishop takes e6. She's got 2 bishops, 1 for each of you. Okay, you can't take the bishop, but you can't not take the bishop. So black has already lost here. Black took the bishop, because if you don't take the bishop, I'm taking this pawn with check. Man, it's looking bad. Okay, then bishop takes knight. The idea is queen h5 check. And here comes checkmate and winning the queen and such. Queen takes d4. Now, the main line is bishop takes, queen check, king f8 allows mate in 1, and therefore is bad. King e7, queen h7 check, king e8 allows mate in 1, and king f8 allows mate in 1, and king d6 loses the queen. Knight f7 check wins the queen. Okay, so he didn't take the bishop. Black played the move, queen takes d4, and white played queen h5 check anyway. And now black has a problem. King f8 runs into queen f7 mate, and king d8, which is the other legal move, loses for several reasons. The simplest, I guess, is knight f7 check and bishop takes queen. That's pretty winning. White's up a queen for nothing. I mean, and then on YouTube, they'll be like, black has a pawn for the queen. Terrible. Okay, so after queen h5 check, black resigned. And remember, white was better in that 4-queen middle game because of the king safety, and that's exactly what happened. Susan sacrificed on e6, opened up the black king. Susan castled herself, and her king was never in any danger, and the game ended because black couldn't get his king out of danger. And that line is good for white. The 4-queen line gives white an advantage due to king safety. So we should play like Jacobian did. Unfortunately, Jacobian played like Jacobian did, and I lost. So if you want to see an example of me losing, look at the game Feingold-Jacobian U.S. Championship, I think 2008, from Tulsa. And you'll see how I got beat. But Susan had better luck than I did. The truth hurts. Anyway, Susan Polgar, one of the best players in her family, and don't forget it, one of the top. And she hasn't played chess anymore, and she doesn't coach anymore. Now she's living the good life. She did all of that. She traveled around the world playing chess. Now she travels around the world not playing chess. That's a lot more fun, believe me. I'm Grandmaster Ben Feingold. If you would like to sponsor a lecture, please contact Karen at atlchessclub.com. And I want to thank our sponsor again, Lauren Benedict, for sponsoring this lecture. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.